Tonight on the line, Owen Morgan of Telltale and Prophet of Zod take your calls on religion, theism, and spirituality. Don't you change that channel. You know where you are. You're on The Line.
We're live, and I am a pair. Who do you want to be, Katie? Do you want to be Prophet of Zod, or you want to be Owen?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll be Owen. I'll be Telltale. You be Prophet of Zod. We are not Owen Morgan and Prophet of Zod. We are Katy Montgomerie and Shannon Q. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Line. I'm so excited that Katy is here tonight. It's Katy's first time on The Line. So before we start taking calls, we've already got some in the queue. Katy, why don't you tell everybody who you are and where they can find you and what you're up to, what you're all about?
Hi, I'm Katy Montgomerie. I do a lot of arguing on Twitter. I'm basically Twitter's resident knobhead. And I spend a lot of time discussing feminism, LGBT issues, and atheism, probably in that order. So, yeah, come follow me and watch me battle with people.
And Katy has a YouTube channel, too. It is linked in the description along with her Twitter. You can go check her out. She's awesome. You will very, very much enjoy her if you like what we're doing here. I'm so pumped that you're here with us today. We are going to get converted to Christianity or some form of theism today. I'm certain that that's what's going to happen. Someone's finally going to convince us.
I'm ready. I'm ready for eternal afterlife.
Me too. I've been looking forward to it actually all day. I can't wait. There's a small cat trying to destroy my life. So if you see me frequently go, no, well, I'm mute. I'm sorry. Everybody.
So
you also have, Poppy. We can have dueling cats. Oh, Poppy's probably a good cat. Maddie, small cat here is trying to wreck my lights at the moment. So we'll see what happens. Oh, you're just getting emotional because we're so excited about being converted to theism today. It's an emotional thing that's happening to both of us right now. And in honor of the Brit, I am in tea in my TARDIS mug because British people like tea, right? That's what you're supposed to do when we're having tea time.
I don't like tea or but I have a cocktail.
Oh!
So.
I see. I should have a martini. Now I'm jealous. I got tea. Now I feel like I really I dropped the ball. I should have a martini too. Are you ready to start taking some calls, Katy? Are you ready to get converted? Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go. So our first caller is going to be Mel. Mel, thank you for calling The Line. What would you like to talk about today? Oh, where's Mel? Mel. Hi, Mel. Can you hear us? Hello? Mel.
Hi.
Hello, Mel. Hi, there's Mel.
Hi.
How you doing, Mel?
Hello.
You're on The Line. What would you like to talk about today?
Hello.
You're a bit jumpy.
Mel,
sorry, you kind of cut out.
Mel, I think there may be something wrong with your connection. Hello?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
We can hear you now. Yeah. What would you like to talk about today?
Okay, hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Katy. Hi, Shannon. Well, I know that Katy knows me. I'm Mel on Twitter, drawn out of shape. I appeared on Katy's YouTube channel. We had a good conversation on there. But I think Shannon might know me as well. But what I wanted to call and talk about is a lot of it. I'm trans. I'm a trans woman like Katy is. And I wanted to talk about a lot of the challenges. I'm sorry, are you hearing me?
Ooh, I can hear you. I think Katy might be frozen, though. I can hear you, Mel. Can you hear me? I think we lost Katy for a second, though. I think Katy's frozen. So you can talk to me for a sec while we get Katy back. So go ahead, Mel. What's up?
All right. So what I really want to talk about is just like a lot of the challenges that people like Katy and I, trans people, face. They tend to come from a lot of these people who believe in this thing that they call biological reality, where basically to be either a man or a woman, you have to, have a penis. To be a man, you have to have XY chromosomes, have male reproductive capacity, all of that kind of thing. And a lot of these very same people I know for a fact are religious people. They are Christians. And something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is just ways to challenge those people on their own grounds, like using the concept that they use of biological reality to determine what a man or a woman is, to just apply to their own thinking about their religion, you know? So, like, for instance, like, the Christians always will capitalize Jesus and God's pronouns with he, him, both of them. Like, they're so important. The maleness of Jesus and God is just so incredibly important that they put that much influence on it. And just that whole thing, it breaks down completely logically if you apply it to the same kind of thinking that they have about trans people. Because just if you accept that biological reality thing, then you have to accept that Jesus had a penis and XY chromosomes that he couldn't have possibly had because he only came from a woman. There was no male influence in Jesus's chromosomes, so I guess that Y chromosome had to just come from God, and then we have to buy into, I guess, the concept that God had a penis. It just gets really, really ridiculous very, very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're talking about the actual, like, even if you take Jesus out of the picture and you, like, after ascension, they seem to attribute maleness to this immaterial concept of a God. And that immaterial concept of a God that doesn't have a corporeal form, sorry for the mispronunciation. I'm very Nova Scotian and I pronounce things wrong. They're attributing maleness for some reason other than gamete production or genitalia. They're attributing maleness to that deity because they've ascribed this specific aggregate of mental schema regarding, you know, either behavioral manifestation or action, the attributes of maleness, which is a social construction that they're simultaneously not acknowledging the existence of while asserting. Is that kind of what you're saying, Mel?
Right, that's exactly right. And yeah, that kind of thinking just drives me crazy. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me at all that it's just those conflicting beliefs, and just that's really something that I would challenge anybody who is both Christian and calls themselves gender critical or whatever to think about, is just, you know, how does that thinking apply to your own beliefs and the way that you treat the gender of your apparent God, which just also I really challenge them to think about the fact that it's basically the foundations of everything we call the patriarchy. Like, it's just so, there's so much power that comes through that concept that God is male, God is masculine, and it just spreads out all over culture, and it's really a horrible influence on society, I think.
And by definition, it would have to be divorced from biological essentialism that they're attempting to utilize to make that argument, because it's a supernatural, like, deity that is outside of the realm of perceived and measurable reality. So they need to recognize that they're attributing maleness or femaleness to these deities based on something, and it's not genitalia, it's not gamete production, which is what their argument is when it comes to biological essentialism. And I did that the other day on Twitter.
Exactly.
Somebody was coming at me about all of this bullshit, like being just a transphobic asshole. And I said, prove I don't have a penis. Like, why are you calling me a woman? You can't see my chromosomes. You have no idea what type of gamete production is going on inside me, if any at all. Why am I a woman? And it starts to fall apart real goddamn fast, because they realize that all of the things that they're going to say have to do with either some sort of concept of sexual dimorphism, where they can see physical attributes of me that they attribute womanhood, and those can be augmented, or some sort of internal social psychological schema that has societal aspects that changes and morphs over time. Like, I have long hair and I wear makeup. Those sorts of things that And then you realize that those are just, schematic aggregates that fall apart upon closer examination, because then if the definition of what is a man and a woman become so bimodal in a distribution that you can't really have a solid definition. So, I think that, but I had not thought about the deity thing before. And Katie is back. Katie, sorry.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Yay. Hello, Katie.
Problem 30 seconds into the call. But so obviously that's the start, but I guess I'll add one thing when you're talking about God's genitals and whatever. So an interesting thing I thought of, perhaps from the sort of Christian perspective, is if God made Adam first, I presumably there was some time in which he made Adam, and he maybe even wasn't planning to make Eve at the start, or he was planning all along. There's that kind of contradiction of whether he intended to or not, or whatever. He made Adam with a penis and with sperm that had no goal. I mean, just for masturbating, or I don't know. What was the point in creating him with a penis without?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was completely unrelated to what you're talking about, but it's just I just logged in and you were talking about God's genitals.
No, it's very related to what I was talking about.
Okay, good.
It's just, I'd really challenge all of those people to just think about their belief in biological reality as it relates to their belief in the Bible. So if the Bible is the true word of God, as a lot of them believe, then we have to believe that God has self-identified as a man. And I'll leave you guys off with that and let you go on to another caller.
I like it, Val. Thank you. I'm so glad that you called. It was very nice to meet you, and I appreciate you being here. And I'm so glad Katie left so you and I could talk.
Sorry,
Thanks so much, and I'll have a good rest of your day. That is interesting, though. I hadn't thought of that. I thought about it in the realm of attempting to utilize me as the locus of demonstration in this sort of argument that people have, where they don't even realize that when you meet somebody, you're essentially kind of assigning them a gender based on a confluence of attributes that you've learned equate gender through presentation. You're not seeing the things that you're arguing gender is. You're simultaneously saying, well, gender is your genitalia and your chromosomes and your gamete production, but you're a woman, even though I can't verify those things. It's why am I then?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they'll often say, a man doesn't become a woman just because they put a dress on, which is obviously true. Anyone can wear a dress, but they kind of present that argument as, doesn't matter how you change your appearance at all, I'm still going to view you as a man or as a woman. But then that isn't actually factually how they do it, because they can only go based on what they sense or on what you tell them. And if you don't tell them any information about your gametes, which seems to be one of their favorite things, and they can't sense your gametes, so they make an informed guess based on your appearance, which is kind of the opposite of the argument they present. So, but then they won't refuse to acknowledge it. It's just, and it drives me banana bonkers every time it happens. All right, well, we're going to go to the next caller. So the next caller that we have on the line is going to be Joseph. So Joseph is calling from Utah. Hi, Joseph. How are you doing today? Welcome to the line.
Hello, Shannon and Katie. Thank you so much for taking my call. It's an honor to speak with two lovely ladies tonight. And I'm very grateful for your content and your platforms. I think you do a lot of really great feminist, atheist content.
Oh, well, thank you. All right. Well, that's good, Joseph. We're done. That's enough. Good call. Thanks.
Have a great night.
What would you like to talk about today, Joseph?
Oh, I'll take my check in the mail. No, just kidding. So, I feel like I can acknowledge that my personal religion, the one that I was raised in, my grandparents and parents are a part of this religion, and it is a cult, but it's like my church is a mother of cults. Utah is like a theme park of cults. There's so many of us, and we even have we have like a cult con in the summer, just like Comic-Con, and it's called Sunstone, and so all the cult leaders get to gather and like do cult stuff, you know. But it's like even I, as a mentally ill, celibate gay man, I'm an aspiring cult leader, you know, like it's something that my parents will actually like give their blessing on, but I have to actually, you know, like live up to a certain standard, something that in our community, you know, it's like you have to keep certain commandments, you have to be very devoted to our theology, our religion, our authority, stuff like that. And, you know, I have a lot of personal limitations.
When you say, like, you're an aspiring cult leader, is that, like, you kind of joking around with the word? Like, obviously, you know, maybe you acknowledge you're in a cult, but I presume that not everyone at this cult con or whatever you're calling it, like your parents and stuff, do they consider it as a cult as well? Is that, like, how you view it?
Well, because it's like you can be someone within our culture who hears voices and they will say that is good, that is a sign that the Spirit is with you. If you like pursue that, as I have, you know, like allowed myself to believe that, you know, what my brain, what my mind, what my heart, what my spirit is telling me is coming directly from these. I mean, we worship a god and a goddess, a mother and father in heaven, and Jesus, and so we're very like, you know, willing to believe in things that are not accessible to other like religions, but that's what makes us so fertile as a church that produces other break-off communities.
If you like, just say that. There's different ways you could look at sort of like the voices that you hear and like your aspirations to become like a leader in, you know, a religious like leader. So you could say perhaps they are the gods talking to you, and, you know, perhaps we could argue that in a bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is or isn't a cult, because I guess when we say cult, we often think of there's like some kind of manipulation behind it, or some kind of like personality leader who sort of you know, controls things, and it's often got some sort of malicious intent to it, or something like that.
Control, thought control, undue influence, control, so behavioral control.
Are you using cult in that sense, or are you using cult in sort of like just a small group, a small religious group kind of sense? I'm just trying to understand what you mean by cult.
Thank you for that question, because I'm sure that both of you, you know, by detractors have been accused of trying to be something equivalent to what would be an unhealthy cult leader kind of power dynamic with your listeners. I mean, I can just imagine that that's what people think, that people go on YouTube in order to like influence other people's children. And I know that that's not, you know, what you guys are doing. I know that YouTube provides a unique platform for people to be themselves, and they're not necessarily asking for the same kind of things that, you know, Jim Jones or, you know, L. Ron Hubbard were demanding of people. You know, what I think you want is for people to hear your story and your perspective. You know, when I come with all of my crazy cult beliefs, it's like I want that too. You know, maybe I want the validation of my own community, but I'm willing to seek other believers out in the ether. And, you know, I feel very motivated by what you have both done. Like I'm sure that people have criticized you for your platforms. And,
never.
You know, if it isn't too...
What I'm interested in is, like, you keep describing yourself as like having crazy cult beliefs, and obviously, like, maybe some people who are like cult leaders or in cults don't see the difference between what they're doing and what someone who's not in a cult is doing, and maybe they would think that I'm like a cult leader and they aren't or something. But it seems almost like you view that the other way around. And I'm just wondering, like, do you feel like, I don't know, it just seems very much like I'm a crazy cult person. Like, is that actually like how you view yourself? If you think your views are crazy, why do you hold them? I guess is what I'm getting to. Or is that just like are you suggesting that maybe what we do is we could say, oh, it's a crazy cult thing, and so it's the kind of same as your thing, and we're all just like different players in this crazy cult game? Like, is that how you're trying to suggest it?
That actually, yeah, that sounds, very much like, because, to make supernatural claims, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I guess if someone was going to say, like, oh, I'm in a cult and you're in a cult and Shannon's in a cult, we're all just our own cult leaders. I guess my point that I would make as like a difference is there's a difference between like having some kind of influencer status, whatever you want to call it, where people are listening to what you're saying and hearing your beliefs and stuff, and like actively trying to convert people, I guess is perhaps one difference. So maybe you could still argue that I was trying to convert people into believing what I believe. I don't know.
There's more to
I feel
a cult
like
than that, too, I think. Like, in order for it to be a cult, it's not just about influencing people to attempt to adopt or understand or see your perspective or understand your beliefs. There's also, like, behavioral control and thought control. Like, you cut people out of your lives.
If we just ignore the label cult, it's like classic meaning for the moment, and we just say what Joseph is trying to do is the same as what you're trying to do, Shannon, and same as what I'm trying to do. So what's the difference? Like, he's trying to, convert people to his religion of Jesus, the God and the Goddess, and you're just trying to convert people to your belief system, and I'm just trying to convert people to my belief system. So how can we accuse him of having a damaging cult when we're doing the same thing? And so what are the differences in our positions? And I guess the big thing, perhaps all three of us would argue this, but I would say that the position I'm trying to take is the rational one, which is just based on the evidence that we have. And I want to say to people, I'm not trying to tell you what to believe. I'm not just giving you things. I'm not saying, here's a list of commands you should believe if you want to follow me. I'm like, mate, what you believe in right now has a logical contradiction in it. So I'm going to point that out. And if you find a logical contradiction in my beliefs, tell me, and they're going to change. Whereas perhaps someone who has a religion that they're sort of trying to change people's view to, they're going to say, well, here is just a part of our religion, and that can't change, and there's no evidence for it, and that's just what we believe here. And I don't think that anything that I stand for or believe in is that, at least not intentionally. And if someone pointed out that it was, then I would have to think about it and change my position, I guess.
Does that resonate with you, Joseph?
I mean, very much. Thank you so much. That, I really appreciate being able to have these conversations with people who are, they're in a minority perspective for sure. And that, leads, I think, to a lot of understanding and empathy. So thank you so much. I mean, I would like to post some slideshows of I get impressions from what I believe are divine spirits, and they tell me weird things. And so I want people to look at my videos. I want them to look at what would be like sermons, and does this even make sense? Because this is my reality. It doesn't necessarily need to make sense to everybody, but I'm sure it would make sense to some people.
If, I guess with your belief system, if you presented your belief system and you heard back from what people said, and if someone said to you, this assertion you're making doesn't have any evidence at all, or this assertion you're making conflicts with another assertion, would you then be in a position to change your view on that? Or is this kind of your religion is your belief system, and so it's not going to change? Because I think that's often quite a difference between these things. Some people either avoid criticism, avoid facing sort of contradictions in the worldview, or they'll just shut down and go into defense mode. And if you're open to listening to people come up with, if you put your slideshow on and I watch it and then I say, oh, that's great, and lots of this kind of makes sense internally, but it's based on this premise, and I think that premise doesn't stand, then where are you going with that? Like, are you then going to say, like, fuck you, Katie, or are you going to be like, oh crap, I need to reevaluate my entire belief system? Or somewhere in between, I guess.
Right, and so as content on my personal YouTube account, I try to be very candid about times where I've been mistaken in my spiritual prophecies. And so like when I put that information out there, I am inviting scrutiny, but at the same time, it's hopefully something that people want to engage with because it's not threatening. I don't want to threaten anyone's identity or their beliefs, but my beliefs, like, because of whatever neural condition I have, it's like religious, ecstatic experiences that it's like I don't know how else to share that with people. It's such a personal thing that happens. So I try to make YouTube videos that explain what that feels like, and I'm sure that's similar to what you both want to achieve on YouTube.
Not necessarily, though. I don't think, Joseph. It sounds to me like you have personal experience that you've interpreted in a very specific way, and you would like to transmit the specific way that you interpreted those personal experiences, so that other people who have maybe had a similar experience could potentially also interpret that experience as you did. And that is actually kind of the antithesis of what I want to do. Because what I want to do is I want people to understand the fallibility of perceptions, because I spent a long time studying perceptions and cognition, the fallibility of perceptions and cognition. Recognize that we are all inherently prone to, and in fact will interpret things incorrectly, inadequately, and it will affect us detrimentally potentially as a result. So to be more careful in scrutinizing and understanding the way that our perceptions and cognitions operate. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is, my perceptions and cognitions operate this way. Perhaps yours do too, and thus we can commiserate about how we interpret these experiences similarly. And I don't necessarily think that that's a super valuable endeavor, unless you're looking for people to commiserate with. Like, if that's your end game, is to say, well, other people might have similar experiences than me, and I would like to be able to, get us together so that we can talk about how we experience things similarly. That can kind of start a loop where you're just utilizing each other to reinforce how you interpret experiences, instead of really scrutinizing how you interpret experiences to make sure that there's a real solid ground for validity and it's based in reality. You can start to deviate from reality pretty strongly if you create that type of environment. So I don't think that is what I'm trying to do. I think I'm actually trying to do the opposite. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess
for sure. And please.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I guess there's something which I think I do, which perhaps could be confused with that, which is sharing my experiences and my interpretation of my experiences. And I guess what I really want to do is find out what's true and communicate that to other people and show why it is true. Here is the evidence for this. Here is the evidence for this. Therefore, I've made this conclusion. But then also, I will have some experiences based on that, and it can be valuable to add your own experience, as long as that's not then evidence for this wider conclusion. So I guess my example would be as a trans woman, I can say, this is what I felt growing up. This is what I felt in transition, and this is why I personally feel my path is the right one for me. However, I couldn't then say therefore transition is good. What I would have to then do is say, well, here are the facts, and this is what we know from studying thousands of trans people, and this is what we know from all of these other things, and they add up, and this is how my experience kind of fits with that in some way. But my experiences can be valuable, but they're not like my argument for my position, I guess. So
yeah, that makes sense to me, because you can't divorce anything from experience, really. every time you're communicating anything, it's based on experience. So I 100% agree with that. But I just don't think that just communicating your experience as though it represents some form of truth, especially when you're talking about things like prophesying.
Yeah.
Gets into some dangerous territory. Is any of that valuable?
That's why, well, thank you, yes, because like I fear like the possibility that 10 years from now I could just be like a failed cult leader, but I want to also just be a source of entertainment, and
just don't make a cult.
Thank you
Joseph.
so much.
Cults are bad. No cults. Okay, just try to.
Cults are bad.
Why don't you try to be a thought leader instead? Be somebody.
But like one who a rational thought leader.
Yes.
Present your story.
Exactly.
Present your story and look at the facts, and that's the best.
Thank you so much. And one last thing, the Jesus Christ that talks to me on a continuous basis, he's very chatty. He wants me to tell, both of you and your audience that Judy Garland reincarnated as Zooey Deschanel.
Oh, Joseph, I would very much appreciate it if you would. I recognize that this is a reality of an experience that you've just had. And I would very much appreciate it if you could potentially seek out a form of mental health counseling or therapy to ensure that this experience is one that you can validate and isn't having a detrimental effect on you, okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Joseph. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right? Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome, Joseph. Oh, bless him. He was kind.
Interesting. I've got cat hair floating around the room from Poppy, and it's all going on my nose.
Oh no! Mine apparently has calmed down briefly, but that's probably short-lived. I'm sure the screen will come down at any moment. At any moment. All right, are you ready for another one, Katie? You need a nose scratch second, because we're gonna talk to. We have so many calls. Holy smokes! Okay, we're gonna talk to Ren next.
Cool.
Hi, Ren. Welcome to the line. What would you like to talk about today? Hi, Ren.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for taking my call and for doing the show. So, I called back in March when Shannon and Dragnot were hosting.
Oh, wow.
And
that was a while.
I was asking, is there any other way besides interpreting it as a spiritual or metaphysical experience? For me personally, it was like an experience where I currently believe that I was like experiencing God's love, like something outside of me, something I wasn't able to imagine. And Shannon, you gave like really helpful explanation that there could be some like neurobiological explanations for that.
Yep.
So I've been doing some reading, just Google, Wikipedia level reading, and I had like a couple follow-up questions if you could offer thoughts on, but then mainly I was just really appreciate if either of you could recommend some better resources like books or academic articles or I don't know, lectures on YouTube and anything where I could learn more, or even terms that I could search on Google, because that would help.
Oh, Ren, I appreciate it. Okay, so I can start with a really good book that's a very good introductory level sort of book that's written in a very palatable way that explains a lot of how we have these real sort of cognitive short switches in how we interpret things. And it's called Brain Bugs, like BUGS, Brain Bugs. I can't remember the name of the author right now. It's a fabulous book. It goes into the science, but it uses really good, solid, real life examples and palatable examples without going too much into the minutia of the technical aspects of things. And it's a really enlightening book if you want to look at how you think and why. Another one that's a little bit more of a heavier read, but is good in a similar way, is a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. So those would be my first two books that I would recommend that are really palatable. And both of them, I believe, are available in audiobooks as well.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Are you doing okay, Ren?
Yeah. I am doing great, actually. Yeah.
Good. So you've had some progress on your journey then? That's led you into being in a bit of a better place than the last time we spoke?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been doing some reading and just thinking, like, I mean, I still personally believe in God, but yeah, I some of the things I was reading about was like, well, I was looking into like I guess other faith belief systems that also like have like emotional or spiritual experiences or like worship. So like and then I was thinking like, like if, certain faiths, like they believe they can experience like spiritual mediumship, or I think like in Sufism and Islam, they believe or they experience some metaphysical experiences. And then for me, I was thinking, okay, like why, I guess, why am I interpreting mine as well, my background is Protestant Christianity, so I was thinking, okay, is this definitely, like, why am I interpreting it as Jesus if someone else is interpreting it as another God or spirit? Like, is it coming from the same source? Or, yeah, I'm kind of thinking through that.
Yeah. You really like brain, but sorry, go ahead, Katie. Go.
I was just going to. I think that's a good question to ask. Like, ask yourself for any sort of religious position. Is like there are people throughout history, all across the world, who have lived and had these experiences, and they've known for a fact in their hearts that it's their God, and they have the same amount of evidence, the same amount of experience, the same feelings. Often you can like read their reports and stuff, and they've just thought it was a different God or gods. And it's interesting to ask why that's the case. And I know that sort of at the end of my sort of journey into becoming an atheist when I was younger, there was a situation where I went to like a sort of Bible camp thing, and they were talking about the Holy Spirit and what it felt like, and they were playing this like uplifting Christian music that really makes you feel good even if you aren't Christian. And they were saying that feeling you get that feels like warmth coming through you, and it just makes you almost feel like you could cry, and it's, they're describing all these things, and I was thinking, well, I am feeling this, and you could say this was the Holy Spirit, but I know for a fact that I have felt this exact same feeling watching Cannibal Corpse play death metal, and it's just a feeling of like emotions and music, and like it's just overwhelming, and it's incredible. But I just interpreted that as like really good riffs rather than a sort of Holy Spirit or any other kind of religious thing. So
it
sorry, that was
to do with story. No, that's super valid, and actually goes into the point that I was about to make, which actually ties into the book Brain Bugs. So one of the things that really hits home, and that's right, effortless, Katie. One of the things in the book that is really interesting to read about is the concept of framing and neural network encoding when it comes to memory recall. So the framing is really, really important for how we interpret cognitive experiences. So I'll actually do something that's in the book because I think it's a really good demonstration. So Ren, name a country in Africa.
Swaziland.
What are the two colors that you see on a checkerboard?
Green and purple.
Oh, no, on a checkerboard, like if you're playing chess or checkers?
Oh, black and white.
Okay. Can you name an animal?
Wallow.
What did you say?
Koala?
Koala. Oh, okay. You actually deviated because most people, when they did a study using those as priming questions. And when you ask somebody, and it could be because you deviated in the colors that may have gone off, may have been white, went off. But in the study, if you ask somebody to name a country in Africa, followed by a completely segregated question type, which is the two colors on a chessboard, because of the way our memories are encoded and because of the way that our access to memories works in neural networks, the part of your brain that's already active is most likely to respond quicker. So if the part of your brain that stores your concept of Africa is activated along with the part of your brain that stores the colors black and white, most people are going to name either an animal from Africa, and on measure, most people are going to name one that's striped, and almost everybody's going to say zebra. That was something that they found as a result. So because of those priming questions, those parts of your neural network are already activated. It's interesting to me that you deviated because it was almost always entirely the case that most people would say zebra, given those two priming questions. I'd be interested to see in the comments section below who thought zebra when I said that, as opposed to who thought, and provided people are honest, because I'm sure there's a million theists right now that are going, I thought about me. But a lot of people probably did think zebra without, even realizing it. So if you look at thinking fast and slow, this goes to Katy's point too, right? When you have these experiences, the context that you're in when the experience is taking place, as well as how it's being framed to you by the people that you're interacting with or the society that you're in, are absolutely going to influence the manner in which you interpret that experience. And if you have external reinforcement from people around you saying, I have that experience, I interpret it this way, you're going to say, oh, okay, well, that reasonably is why I'm having this experience too. There's consensus on how this experience is interpreted, and thus I'm going to view it through that lens consistently, which may not always be the case. It's kind of a fallacious way of thinking, but a lot of our ways of thinking are essentially just cognitive shortcuts that we use because they're easy and they don't necessarily harm us. Does that make some sense? I'm so excited that you said koala, and I'm still confused that you said purple and pink with checkerboard. Where are you getting your checkerboard?
I was just thinking more of a checkerboard pattern than a literal checkerboard.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm not a very linear thinker, so it could just be my brain.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But yeah, I'd be interested to see. You should look at Brain Bugs. Brain Bugs is a really palatable book, and it answers, I think, a good amount of the questions that you may have surrounding neural aspects of cognition and interpretation and perception. And I'm glad you called back. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate both of your input. So.
No, not a problem. I'm glad you're in a good place.
Perhaps go to some death metal shows and see if you can recreate the same feelings. And
Katy's a death metal apologist. Just in case you were wondering, that's essentially she's smuggled her way in here as an atheist in disguise, but really she's here just to promote death metal. That's why Katy's here.
Not incompatible.
Not incompatible at all. It's true. All right, when we will let you go. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you for calling back. See you later.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
She's lovely. Yeah, actually, before we even went live, my chat was like, "Can you ask Katy what some of her favorite death metal bands are?"
So, amazing! Paulogia. They're an American prog death metal band, and I would describe it as super intense technical death metal, but with aquarium sounds. So it's sweeping, makes you feel like you could be in space, or it's really passive, but then underneath there's this super active, aggressive, mad technical, crazy guitar stuff going on, and it's just such a good combination. No offense if they're watching, but skip their newest album and listen to the two before that. They're oh, so good. So good. That's my top at the moment death metal recommendation. So
all right, well, there you go, chat. You got what you wanted. There you go. There's your answer. That's right. That's what we're gonna do in between calls. Katy's just gonna recommend death metal bands that I am never gonna even bother to try and listen to. Sorry, Katy, I love you, but that's not my thing. I could recommend some good folk acoustic bands, but not death metal. All right, we're gonna talk to Ryan. What? Am I canceled? Are you canceling me? I'm probably canceled right now.
I was just saying, I'll send you voice notes. I'll pretend that I've got something interesting to say to you and then just play a death metal song. Anyway, sorry.
It's like your version of Rick rolling me. All right, so we're going to talk to Ryan next. Ryan is calling from Utah. Hi, Ryan. What would you like to talk about on the line today?
Hi.
Hi there, Shannon. Hi, Katy.
Hey, Ryan. What's up?
Hi.
Did I get the name right? Is it Katy?
Yeah.
My
Hello?
name's Shannon. Hello.
Hi,
Can you hear
yes.
us?
You did get the name right.
Yeah, you cut out for a minute. I couldn't hear.
Awesome.
Yeah, hi. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. Looking
Good,
forward to
thanks.
talking to you. What would you like to talk about?
So I'm a little nervous because the last time I heard you talk to someone about this, you hung up on them.
Ooh, me?
Yeah. I think you said it was the first time you ever hung up on a caller.
Oh, that sounds like on Tangelo. Yeah, I totally hung up on him because he was driving me nuts. It wasn't about the subject; it was how he was acting. So go ahead. I'm sure you'll be fine. Go ahead, Ryan.
I don't think it was on Tangelo. I've heard his calls before. But no, so I'm recently deconverted this last year. And all of my like social interactions with people are really kind of rooted deep religion, deep conservative ideologies. And so like my entire worldview, politically, socially, religiously has kind of been flipped on its head this last year. And I'm still trying to kind of find my way to solid ground. And listening to people like you, other hosts of the line, the ACA shows has kind of helped guide me there. And I really wanted to ask this question the last time you were on with Anthony Magnabosco, because I think it kind of ties well together with his expertise with street epistemology.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're more than qualified to help me out with it.
Oh, okay. Yay. What's the question?
So the call so I've actually been thinking of this for months and I haven't been able to really figure it out yet. But the call that was happening the last time you were on, I think it was with Matt Dillahunty. The caller tried to draw a parallel between the way that atheists, specifically like the ACA shows, practice skepticism for religious beliefs, but seem to not practice skepticism when it comes to people who identify as transgender. And that's when you and Matt both said to buckle up and blew up on the guy.
Oh. No,
No. I actually do and have done this. I think it can be difficult, for a number of reasons that's worth sort of acknowledging before you start doing it. One is that, at least like in the USA and in lots of countries, or maybe even most countries, the religious position is like the dominant one. No one is like, at least the sort of major religion people aren't being like oppressed for their religion. I guess in every country there will be religious groups who probably are oppressed for their religion. But certainly when you're talking with Christians from the USA, like is, lots of the atheist content is, you're not talking with people who are at risk of losing their rights. And I think it's worth considering that when you talk to people and discuss these things, that even though you definitely, I think really with any belief, you should be able to go right in and really find out whether it's true and, understand the whole thing. But there is definitely going to be a context difference to like consider before doing that. And that might make some people a bit defensive about doing it. And I think especially cis people, so cis people are people who aren't trans people, when they're asked to defend a trans position and they are like, they have trans friends and they, everything fits with their worldview and stuff, but they haven't necessarily, or maybe even if they have drilled down and fully understood it, the next level above going right down to understand something is being able to teach it and discuss it with people. And often people don't get to that position. And so they'll come up with this thing and they'll say, well, what about this? And you're like, well, I know that's wrong, but I don't think I could defend it. And I know that if I try, you might be able to sort of, there'll be some argument about this. And I know that like all my trans friends are watching and I don't want to make this mistake. And if I do, then I might end up legitimizing this position, which like encourages the oppression of trans people. And it can be like a spicy position to be in. So I can understand why some people might get defensive. But I would say that there are a lot of trans people, particularly who do apply this sort of skeptical position to being trans. I actually think that's what I personally did in order to like come out. I think I started from like a transphobic position, like fairly deeply transphobic, and then sort of applied skepticism. I think I started off religious and LGBT phobic in general. I sort of confronted religion from sort of a feminist perspective and then a gay rights perspective. And then I understood how skepticism works, and kind of as that evolved, then I got to trans rights and applied it there. And then that's how I came to my position on trans people, which then enabled me to come out, because I wasn't going to come out as trans and like change my whole life around if it was wrong. Like I didn't, that it's such a big deal to me. And I'm sure there are loads of people who do that. And they come out because they're not going to think about it. It's just, it's a strong feeling you have, and that's enough for some people. But for me personally, I did want to properly attack it with skepticism. So what I guess my 2 points there are: beware that lots of people might be uncomfortable doing it, not necessarily because they can't, but because of the worldwide context with trans people at the moment. And secondly, there are trans people who do it, and you just need to find the right ones, and you need to get them in the right frame of mind, because I'll talk with anyone about trans issues on Twitter. And if you want to personally, or anyone else watching, or anyone in the comments wants to, on Twitter, DM me or tweet me and say, what about this position? I don't understand the skeptical position on trans rights for this. Like, I'll take it. Don't come up to me in the pub and start demanding that I defend my life and my position. And, that's kind of bullshit. So yeah, anyway, sorry, that was a really big ramble, and I hope I've kind of addressed your things, but does that kind of answer what you were suggesting, like your question?
Yeah, it does kind of line up with my best guess is the best way to go about it, because I've become 100% supportive of LGBT rights, gay rights, trans rights, civil rights in general. But when I hear someone say about religion, how do you know that that's true? And then the response is, I just feel it. And then the response to that is, well, are feelings a reliable method to find out what's true or not? Like, okay, well that makes sense. They're not a reliable way to find
Ryan,
truth.
can I interrupt you for 1 second?
And then when I hear someone else...
Okay, so there's going to be two things here, actually. First, I want to address the hang up, because now I do know what you're talking about. That is the first time I hung up on somebody. And the reason for that is, and then I'll get into it, is because
and also
it's a show.
That question.
Yes, I know. Katie, I'm going to let you talk, Katie. No, we're both excited. We're both all worked up. So the reason that I hung up on that caller is because that's a show called The Atheist Experience that I host, right? And people call in sometimes to that show. The premise, it's not like The Line here where we'll call and talk about most anything. You're supposed to call in with your best proof of God. So when people call in saying things like, oh yeah, well, you guys defend trans rights and that, and you're not real skeptics, goodbye. You're not here to talk about your best position on God. You think that's an own. You're not approaching me in good faith. And I'm not in the business of debating people's identities. Now, when it comes down to finding out the truth, like that, when you say the truth and feelings don't lead you to the truth, it's completely separate when we're talking about external reality, how to interpret it, and who we are, what our identity is. What we feel and what we think is who we are. There is nothing else. Like, think about something that comprises who you are that isn't what you feel or what you think. That is the only way to know who you are. That's all you got. That is all of it.
Yeah.
So that is the only way. So it's not like the frame is not the same. Katie's going to butt me. Butt me, Katie.
But what I was going to say is you can actually do this with about trans stuff, and I think the way to do it is to look at it like a medical condition, in that we can, in order to see what's true, we need to be able to like make some kind of prediction and see some kind of result. And in like medicine, you want to be able to say, if someone has this rash and you put this cream on it, then it's better than if we just put water on it. And then therefore we can say this cream works as a medicine. We're not saying it necessarily it's 100% cure. We're not saying the actual true fact is that in reality this cream is a counter to this. What we're saying is we can make a prediction, and it's has some value as a prediction, which is, you know, science in general, and particularly how medicine works. And we can do the same. And so when we're talking about feelings, like medicine in general has a lot of feelings actually involved. Like we can say, is this person's leg broken? We can literally just look at it. We can use an X-ray. Sometimes you can just use your eyes and you can know a leg is broken. If someone says to you, I have a headache, that is just reporting a feeling in most cases, you know, unless you can see a tumor or something. Someone has a headache, but I can still make a prediction. If I have 1,000 people who say I have a headache and I give 500 of them paracetamol and 500 of them sugar pills, the paracetamol ones will report like an increased well-being, I guess, because lots of them won't have a headache anymore. So that's kind of using feelings to make a prediction, because these feelings aren't in a way is what is different to religion, because someone could say like, oh, I feel that my prayers are answered, or that God talks to me or something. And like, well, can we actually make a prediction with that? Like, if your God is talking to you, we should be able to make some kind of better than random guess prediction. And if your prayers are being answered, that should be better than our control group. And so far, with prayer and people talking to God, that's just never been the case. So when we apply science to their feelings, if we get rid of just like, oh, well, that's feelings, but like, if we make a prediction based on the data they have, we can make no valuable prediction. Whereas with some medicine, like having a headache, we can. And it's the same with being trans. So it is difficult to make any diagnosis for any condition that isn't like obvious, like, a broken arm or something. And something like a headache is difficult to diagnose. And being trans is difficult to diagnose. However, we have a diagnosis criteria for trans people. And we know from all of our experimental data that there is a treatment or combination of treatments which we can give to some people, and we know that in general it improves their life. And if we give those same treatments to cis people, it makes their life significantly worse. And we do have data on both of those things. And we know that if we don't give trans people the treatment, it makes their life worse. And so we can make some kind of prediction here. So we're not saying I'm trans because I feel I'm trans, therefore back off, but you feel you're religious, so I'm going to call you out on that. We're kind of saying, that might be how some people communicate it, because, not everyone is a skeptic on being trans. I think most trans people, you're just born trans and you just deal with it. And, it's like if someone just came up to you and said, like, prove you have a headache, you'd be like, mate, fuck off. My head hurts, just go away. And that's kind of what a lot of trans people do. They're like, well, prove you're trans. It's just a trend. They're like, mate, I'm just trying to have a drink here. Whereas a skeptical position would be like, something that I've done myself. And I'm not saying I'm better than anyone, that you have to want to do this and all this kind of stuff. But, you can argue these things and make these predictions. Sorry, I lost my train of thought at the end there. But yeah, I hope that tries to explain the difference between I feel my religion is true and I feel I'm trans.
Yeah, it was never about trying to get a trans person to prove it to me, because I'm not asking them to validate their trans identity to me. It was all about how can I remain philosophically consistent if someone makes a claim and they say that I should take it because they feel that way, and someone else makes a claim and says that I should take it because they feel that way. I felt like there was a conflict there. And I think the reason why is because when I first started out on this issue, I thought of a person who identified as transgender as that being some kind of objective fact, like that is something that you could identify as a marker. What, like you can pinpoint someone's DNA to find out like their genetic heritage, or measure someone to see how tall they are. That being transgender is one of those objective facts. And it took me a while to figure out, or to have someone explain to me, the difference between prescriptive and descriptive. And the way that they said it was that, someone's height would be like a prescriptive fact. It's something that you could demonstrate and justify. But being transgender, or a person's gender identity, is more of a descriptive fact, kind of like someone's, any personality trait. Like if someone said that they were shy, there's no real way that you could demonstrate that a person was shy. They'd say that they're shy, and so they are shy. And that gender identity is kind of that same way. And I was trying to figure out how to make a parallel that I could understand.
Right. I mean, I guess that's true to an extent, because being shy is a characteristic that you could make predictions on. There is, being trans, from the data we have, looks like it's largely nature, like being gay is, and being left-handed is, or something. And that probably means that maybe sometime in the future we might be able to potentially scan someone's brain and say whether they're trans or not. That's ethically dubious. I don't recommend to any scientists to try and do that. But possibly we can do that, and possibly we could turn it into what you're calling a prescriptive fact. We might be able to say people who develop this way in the womb usually end up dealing with their experiences by calling themselves trans and doing something about it. But at the moment we can't do that. And at the moment it is like, when someone says they're trans, I mean, potentially they could be lying. I could lie to you about being right-handed, and I could lie to you about my sexuality, or the fact whether I have a headache or not. But, I mean, that's true, and people do lie about those things, and I'm sure some people lie about being trans. But, 99 times out of 100, why would anyone lie about that? And the only real way we can find out this information today for all of those things is to ask people. Self-reporting is a genuine way of measuring things. I mean, for one person, in medicine, it's often difficult, self-reporting, but certainly when we've got a whole cohort, or whatever the word is, of people, if you've got 1,000 people and you ask them to report their handedness, and then you predict they'll be able to cut paper better with scissors, depending on which ones you give them, you'll be able to make that prediction, and it will go with the sort of self-reported data. And so when people say, I'm trans, believe me, stop questioning, they aren't necessarily saying, when I say I'm trans, therefore I am trans. If I say I'm a woman, that makes me a woman. What they're saying is, the only real way to know is to ask me, and just stop doubting me. It's really tedious. They're just saying that the only way we can really know is to ask people, I guess.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, it does make
that
sense.
all makes sense. The final thing I wanted to ask that kind of ties this back to the street epistemology thing is that, so I have a 5-year-old son, and I plan on raising him, kind of with a secular humanist kind of ideology. And I imagine, there might be, just because we live in a deeply religious area, I anticipate that there might be a time someday where he comes up and says, Dad, I think that I'm a Christian. And I would plan on using the different tools for street epistemology, those different kind of leading questions, to kind of get them to identify where they've made an error, or where they've accepted something as a fact without good justification. And I just felt like if my kid ever came to me and said, Dad, I think I'm transgender, I should be able to ask those same kind of questions and be assured that if he is transgender, then he would reach that conclusion with those questions. That would be a way of validating his identity for him.
So I guess on coming out as anything, I mean, often in the atheist community, people talk about coming out as atheist, but I think, there is a sort of comparable reverse situation where maybe a child of atheist parents comes out as Christian. And also, if someone comes out as LGBT, then I would say the first step is to just reassure them that you love them and that you support them if it's your kid, or if it's someone in your family, because, maybe your kid comes out as Christian and maybe your kid is right and maybe Christianity's true, or whichever religion they do. And you can still have a brilliant relationship with your child. And I think it's important to, even if they're whatever, so that's the first step. Like, if your kid comes home and says, I think I'm a Christian, and you're like, justify to me the problem of evil or something, like, that's maybe a bit full on. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't eventually go there. And it's important for them to confront these problems. And it's the same with being trans. If your kid says, I'm trans, you want to be able to say, well, I love you and I'm going to support you for this, whatever the conclusion is. And I do believe you and I trust you in what you're saying. And that's cool. And then maybe, as time goes on, you wouldn't want, like, this is how the media always sells it, like, oh, I'm trans, cool, let's ship you off to surgery tomorrow. Like, that isn't how it happens. Coming out as trans is, often people see it as the start of the journey, but it isn't. Like, when you come out as trans, the trans person has had months or years of internal processing, and it's kind of like the halfway point. But there is still a long way to go, and they're going to need to see therapists, and they're going to need to talk to friends and family. And in that, there will be times when you can constructively challenge them on their beliefs. Not like, justify what the concept of gender is. But you can say, there's a lot of different things to question. You might be saying, like, these feelings in a lot of trans people are reported for their whole life, and is this something you've experienced? And if it isn't, that's also fine, because some trans people aren't, but maybe it's worth comparing them to other trans people. And, that I think there's a way of confronting people who are loved ones on issues, and it's just difficult to do. And when it's your parents, it's very different to when it's your brothers and sisters, and it's very different to when it's your child. You obviously, as a parent, you want what's best for your child, and that will involve questioning them on their religion and potentially on their sexuality and gender identity. But it's just important to do it in the right way, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, because you wouldn't do it to a child who is cis, right? You wouldn't, if you recognize that gender... Yeah, right. Like, if you recognize that and understand the social and performative aspects of gender, you wouldn't wander into a room where a child is identified. Your child is specifically identifies as their gender assigned at birth. Let's say they're female, male, whatever they are. They're performatively and behaviorally and aesthetically conforming to whatever those standards might be wherever you are at whatever time. You wouldn't walk up to them and go, well, why don't you justify why you're a little girl to a little girl who identifies as a little girl that is this? But as soon as they're trans, you're suddenly wanting them to justify and validate. Like, now it's an inquisition for that. Like, that would already be such a hard process to go through mentally for a child, to come out to somebody that they trust and love, and to wonder what that might mean, to then have to go through an inquisition to justify yourself when you've already, like Katy said, gone through the internal turmoil and had to build yourself up to even making that statement. I would be very, very careful doing something like that. I wouldn't. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. Just, I love you, I support you. We'll get through this together. I'll be here for you. We'll figure out what this means for you. And the only questions that should be asked are, how can we get the best outcome for you so that you are the best version of yourself and live a happy life? Those should be the only questions of any value that matter.
But that's also the way that I would approach religion. It's the same. Yeah. I would say, how can you get the most out of your life? And if you believing in Christianity because it is true, then obviously that could be good for me to find out too. But the way to get your kids to have the best life isn't necessarily forcing them and converting them to being an atheist. It's getting them the skills to question and make the right decision.
Yeah. Teach them how to think, not what to think.
Yeah, and that's the same with being who they are. You know,
Right.
if they start holding a pen with the left hand, then demand where they're doing it. Like,
Sorry, I don't believe in
Yeah.
left-handedness.
Shannon, I totally agree with you, what you said about the love and support. The only thing that gives me pause in unrestricted support is because I have heard stories of people who transitioned and then had surgery and then decided that they had made a mistake.
How do the questions that I suggested to you about how do we figure out what's best for you so that you can live a long, happy, and healthy life as the best version of yourself, if you explore those questions, wouldn't that avoid that outcome?
potentially, but
Yeah.
not
Okay. Yeah.
necessarily.
That's kind of how I imagine like the questions, like the epistemology questions, like not challenging their identity or challenging how they feel, but rather leading them to answers that validate and support their idea. And if the answer that they come to doesn't support their idea, then maybe they're not on the right track.
It could be the case, and you would support them through that. Go ahead, Katie.
Just because you brought it up, and I guess maybe lots of viewers would have, have this idea where they've confronted about detransition people. It does happen, and I guess this is another time where I think it's useful as looking at transition as a medical condition, or as a medical treatment, in that no medical treatment is going to have 100% like success rate. Like for example, knee surgery has a regret rate of nearly 20% in the UK, which like if someone was going to get knee surgery, you wouldn't even really ask if they're going to regret it, but like nearly 1 in 5 people do. So there are going to be, even in our world where we scan brains in the future and we can tell whether someone is trans or not, there's possibly still going to be people who regret it. And the goal is, on a society-wide level, is to minimize the percentage of people who are going to regret it. Currently, for example, in the UK with the NHS, the detransition rate is less than 1%, and about half of those detransition because of societal pressure rather than regret. However, there are still going to be regretters, and like however many there are is going to be too many, because it's bad to give anyone a medical treatment that wasn't right for them. But I guess there's only so much questioning you can do to get to us. Like you can get to someone to 99% sure, and you can get them to 99.9% sure, and then 99.99% sure. There's no way ever any medical treatment is going to be 100%, and it's worth just bearing that in mind as well when you're looking at transition. If this ever comes up in your life, or anyone watching, it can kind of seem cruel to say that. Like if you're looking at someone and you're saying, well, you're 99% sure, but there's a 1% chance that this is going to make your life worse. But that is kind of true with any decision. And sorry, I could ramble on about detransition and transition for ages from here, but I think, that's what I'll add on that.
Some of that helpful, right?
I'm sorry to keep you guys so long.
Okay.
I wish I could talk to you guys the whole rest of the night, because I've kind of adopted that mantra of I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And I want to be convinced of things for good reasons.
It's a good mantra.
And I agree, and I support trans rights and LGBT rights and all of that. I'm just trying to grasp the good reasons rather than just believing it because I feel like it's the right side to be on.
That's valid and fair, and there are good reasons. The good news is there are good reasons. Yay!
Yeah.
Best way to defend.
I tried calling into the ACA before asking about this, and I got turned down once because they said that I was a bigot, and I got turned down another time because they weren't interested in talking to an atheist about it.
I apologize that they had that assumption. I'm glad you're coming to the right places. But when it comes to people calling in the ACA, you have to understand they get small snippets. We're there to talk about belief in God also, not, all of the, there's tangential issues that people seem to want people at the ACA to consistently talk about. And generally it's because they think that that's some sort of own, because supporting trans rights and LGBTQIA plus community in general somehow means that we're selective skeptics. And that's so exhausting consistently, especially when it's not the actual reason that show exists. And because it's so prevalent that people are consistently calling, going, "We owned you, mic drop. You think trans people exist?" So, like, you can only take so much of that before you're like, okay, for everyone who's calling you about this, fuck off, okay? Like, everybody, just stop it. That's not what this show is.
But I'll add that. Welcome to you and the viewers and whatever. Like, just come at me on Twitter, mate. Like, I'll take you on.
Katie's ready.
I'll do. Skeptic about feminism.
if it's okay, Katie, if I can contact you on Twitter. I don't tweet out, I don't talk to people, but I do have a Twitter account.
DM me.
And I'd love to. I think that would kind of help me out here.
And she loves mayonnaise. She loves it. She loves mayonnaise so much. If you come at her with mayonnaise, she'll prioritize your tweet.
But also, I'm a mayonnaise skeptic as well. So.
Yeah, just keep in mind that anything that I say is because if I say something that sounds like something you've heard before from, kind of like a bigoted position, it's because I want to have my mind changed. I want to hear the good reasons. I know it gets tiring for some people.
You're trying to think your way out of a previously held bigoted position, looking for the right reasons, because you empathetically it sounds like that this isn't a tenable position to hold as a human that relates to other humans, and as a skeptic you also want to know the rational reasons, and I understand that. I respect that you're attempting to do faith.
There's such a difference between someone. I mean, the word bigger. I mean, if like sort of definitionally, you're coming in, you're saying, well, I'm not sure about my position on this aspect of trans rights. I want to learn. Whereas bigots come in saying, you're wrong and I'm not going to change my mind. And you know that in an instant. If you say something clumsy and I'm like, well, mate, that's not really the coolest way of phrasing that, but let's discuss. Or if you come in and be like, no, you're wrong, I hate you. You know instantly. So do it, no problem, no stress.
And also just something to keep in mind too is that Katie gave you this invitation that not every trans person or even many trans people really want to engage in the validation and explanation of their existence, because they're constantly having to defend it from bigoted people who aren't interested in actual genuine inquiry. So
it's so destroying.
Yeah. So Katie's your girl, but maybe don't scattershot it if you.
I appreciate
she volunteered as tribute.
I think it's just because of where I live and the climate of the people around me. I'm one of those people that is kind of in need of the civics lesson. And there's not a local person that I know that I can talk to. I've never actually met a person who identified as transgender. Actually, I met a person a long time ago, that I think would identify as transgender now, but I don't know what happened to them.
Also, you might have met a trans person without realizing, so you never know.
Yeah, you could know a trans person right now and have no idea. Just saying.
I've heard I've heard Matt make that point. Someone said that he was a man, and that's like, how do you know?
I recently wrote an article about trans people in passing, and found out about this amazing man, a trans man who transitioned in the 60s or something, and he had 4 long-term partners over the course of his life who were women, and he actually adopted 3 kids, and when he died, they found out he was trans then, and none of them knew for their whole life. And the lady who he was with for 20 years was like, I did not see that coming. So happens.
Wow, fascinating.
Ooh,
very
that
cool.
brings up another question, but I'll save that for Twitter.
Save it, Ryan.
Yeah.
Save it for another time.
Okay, thank you very much,
can pose
guys.
that question to Kate. Anybody who wants to see this conversation continue, it's going to be taken to Twitter. Have a good rest of the day, Ryan. Thank you for calling. All right. Okay, we have time for one more. We'll sneak one more in. Did you want to get another metal band in before we take the next call?
Oh, am I going to recommend? So the band that I'm really hype about at the moment is a Canadian band called Protest the Hero. They're not death metal, but they are like really tech. They're really like hooky choruses. The singer's amazing. Loads of mad time signatures, and also with like sometimes they do like punk beats as well. So it's got loads of energy. Like amazing band. 10 out of 10. Strong recommend.
Very cool. All right. Well, did you want to select the last caller, Katie? Let me know which number, and I'll bring it up. You can see the screen, right? Guest choice.
So everyone left is an atheist.
Yep. What do you think?
I guess number 7 could be interesting.
So Zach?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to talk to Zach. Hi, Zach. Thank you for calling.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Oh, my screen went weird, but we just blacked out for a second. I can hear you. This is Owen and Prophet of Zod. How can we help you today? Welcome to the line. What would you like to talk about, Zach?
So kind of directed towards Shannon because I know you have kids, but my wife and I are both atheists. Her family is very religious. My family, not so much. But we have a 2-year-old, and I kind of want to know, like, how do I approach this in the future with my daughter's friends, her family, stuff like that, because it kind of worries me if I don't know how to. I'm not sure I can always defend it, but I don't know if, like, you know, I don't want her to be looked upon as being bad in her with her circle of friends in the future or family. So just kind of wonder what your guys' thoughts are.
So you're assuming that your child is probably going to identify as an atheist too, then I would imagine. And your concern is that other people are going to look down upon them as a result of them holding those beliefs?
Yes, I don't look at, obviously, if she decides to change her mind in the future, that would be one thing. But, like, as of right now, we don't plan on raising her. Like, I personally would keep her as far away from any church as possible. Now, I guess I'm thinking of, like, when she's, like, 6 or 7 years old, you know, and, like, you know, where she doesn't really, you know what I mean, like, can't really
another
decide,
kid talking
like,
about prayers or songs
right
or
thing,
Jesus or yeah, and she's probably like, "What's God doesn't exist?" And then there might be a negative reaction from the other kids or the parents of other kids that could be a detriment to her. Okay, I got you. So you're attempting to kind of coach her on traversing those social interactions then, without compromising her beliefs. So that is a communication question. So you're going, if this is something that's a legitimate concern based on your area, like for me, for my kid, it's really not a legitimate concern. He has a really strong social support network that know that I'm an atheist here. I'm very, very lucky in that aspect, but know that I'm an atheist and, you know, don't have an issue with it, and know that he is kind of blazing his own trail. Like he'll land wherever he lands based on me teaching him, like I said prior, how to think, not what to think. So what you may want to do is do some scenario running with her if it's something that is of concern, and see what her concerns are, or if she has any as she's starting to interact with people. Because it could be the case, like kids have very dynamic personalities, and in some instances it could be something that is brought up that she just lets it roll off. Like they say, well, there is a God and you're dumb. She's probably just like, okay, whatever. Like, all right guys, okay, fine. Some kids might be like that, and other kids may actually have a detrimental impact as a result of that because they internalize the differences, and those differences other them, and then that causes them to have issues as a result. So I guess you would need to do a pulse check with her and do some scenario running to see, like do mirror interactions with her to say, hey, if this type of thing happened at school, what's the type of thing that you would say? If you say that and they respond like this, how would that make you feel? And if you feel like that, is there something that we can do to prevent you feeling like that if these types of things happen? Is that something that you're concerned about? Do you have a strong person at school that you can talk to? Is there anybody who feels like you feel? Don't predicate your parenting on the assumption that you know how a child is going to feel based on your previous experiences and how you felt, or your concerns or anxiety about future projection. The first thing you should really do is a pulse check to see how they legitimately do feel, and if they have anxiety, what those anxieties are predicated around, so that you can guide her based on the information that matters and is relevant to her locus of emotional control. Does some of that make sense?
Yes, it does. I guess I'm just, because we're in Central Ohio, which is even if the parent was a partier or into the drinking and stuff when they were younger, all of a sudden they become religious. And I've seen that with friends that had kids and stuff, and it's like, oh, well, it's Easter Sunday, we're all going to church on this day, and it just, I'm like, how am I going to handle this when it comes down to it? When I get, sorry, Cecilia, we don't go to church,
Right.
But thank you for taking my question.
No problem. Thank you for calling. Katie, did you have anything that you wanted to add? I know you don't have any kids, but kids.
Yeah,
you were kids.
I guess,
Sorry.
I don't know how relevant this is.
Sorry, you didn't mean to isolate one person.
No, that's okay. I actually cut out for a moment there again. I'm furious at my internet this evening. It's been flaky. But I guess one thing that I'd point out is that, there's a lot of kids are brought up believing in Father Christmas, and there's a moment where they realize that that's not true. But then for a lot of them, there's a moment that, and I know I had this, where you realize that other kids still believe it, and it's you're maybe going to disagree over it, or it's not necessarily good to tell them that it's not true or that it is true or whatever. And I have seen people explaining to kids, and perhaps I would explain to my kid, is some people believe things that you don't believe, and it's not always best to argue about them face to face, and sometimes it's good to just let them have their beliefs. If some other kid believes in God, then if they believe in Father Christmas, then just kind of let them. That might, they'll then understand if some kid gets in their face and no, Father Christmas is real, or no, Jesus is real, then they can kind of see that's kind of the same thing, and it's not a big deal if they disagree about it, because perhaps they'll grow out of it anyway. And I don't really know if that adds much, but that's the thought I had when you first said.
Yeah, teaching them patience and empathy and understanding.
We're also struggling with my in-laws and stuff like that, because I know what their views are, and even my sister-in-law's boyfriend called out my wife on Instagram the other day, and it's just stuff like that we're struggling with.
Spicy.
That will come to light. I'm sorry?
I'd said that's spicy. Don't worry. It's difficult when it's family. I guess from the overall skeptic position, ideally your kid would be exposed to whatever religion and to your atheist position and be taught how to think, and would come to the truest conclusion. But that's kind of idealized a little bit, and it kind of ignores the emotional turmoil of doing that. But certainly, if as long as it's sensible to, and it doesn't get to an abusive level, which I know it can be for some families, but I'm not suggesting that at all for your family. If it's not at that level, then having the grandparents in your child's life is probably a good thing, and they may well try and convert your kid, and perhaps you're going to have to be ready to teach them the critical thinking skills to deal with that. And that's the important thing, teaching them those skills rather than and how to handle the difference of opinion rather than like making sure that they believe the same thing as you. That's perhaps more important.
And ultimately, a child is going to gravitate towards, feel the most safe around, and have the strongest relationship with the adults in their life that don't hold their relationship hostage to their belief system. So if there are other people in your children's lives that are essentially saying, I'll love you more, I'll love you better, I'll love you different, you'll be better, you'll be different if you believe this thing, and that would make you increase in value to me, as opposed to a family member who says, whatever you believe, I support you, I'm here for you, let me help you go on this journey so that we can do it together, your best interest is what I have in mind. Like, that doesn't seem like a difficult choice to, even a child could see that so much so that is where they gravitate towards. They will go where they're the most supported and feel the safest. So long as you provide that space, that will, to a certain degree, inoculate them from that influence, because when they escape that influence, they'll have a soft place to land where they can actually work through the experiences that they had when that other person was attempting to direct how they should think.
Okay.
Sounds like
I know it's hard.
All right. Well,
and they're having a party right now. All right, Zach, we will let you go. Thank you so much for calling. I very much appreciate it. Hopefully there was something valuable in there.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm watching my daughter, and she just picked up something off the floor. So
yeah, they do that. They do that, please. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much, and have a great night and afternoon. Katie, I think you're in England, right?
Yeah, it's 2:30 a.m. here, and I have work tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, we have to let Katie go to sleep.
Well,
Thank you, Zach.
Okay. Well, thank you very much,
guys. You're welcome. Bye. And with that, we have officially come to the end of this episode of The Line. Katie, you'll have to come back and host with me again, please, and thank you.
Yeah,
maybe even with somebody else too. I won't monopolize you because now everybody's going to want to get a piece of you.
And I can call out my internet provider and sort them out. I apologize to all the viewers for my internet cutting out twice. It's very, very frustrating for me too.
Classic prophet of Zod. Classic.
I know. Internet connection. Like, send all your complaints about this episode to him and to Owen. Not right.
Just have to say the Telltale nailed it today. Zod is the one who caused all the problems. Telltale, as usual, completely consistent. Best part of the show. Katie, thank you. For anybody who doesn't know who Katie is, I don't know what's wrong with you. Her links are in the description. You need to go check it out. And if you're watching on my channel, go subscribe to The Line. For goodness sakes, I'm not always going to be the host. Katie's not always going to be the co-host. There are myriad of hosts that you will love and enjoy. If you want to see them all, you have to go subscribe to The Line. And if you like just seeing the individual calls and you want to see them again, subscribe to The Line Clips channel. That's where we're going to be posting them from now on. So if you want to see the individual calls broken out, go subscribe to the Clips channel. And thank you, Katie, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And as always, everybody, like Jimmy always says, help elevate the discourse. Bye, guys.